Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the webinar Partnerships to Improve Equity in Math Course Taking. I'm Heather Huff, the Executive Director of PACE and the moderator of today's webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We'll have three presenters today, McCall Kurlander, Sherry Reed, and Osvaldo Soto, who will be introduced as we go into the sections. And we'll be talking about new research, both on math course taking, what we know about the numbers, about partnerships, and how to improve math course taking, and then an on-the-ground perspective about how partnerships can really advance equity and improve opportunities for students in California. If you have any questions during the presentations, please put them in the Q&A box. Some of them, if they're easy to answer, will be answered real time. Others will be brought to the group at the end of the conversation for a Q&A. We will plan to end today by 12:50 so that folks can have some transition time onto their next events. So without any further ado, I am going to hand it over to McCall Kurlander, a professor at UC Davis, also faculty director of PACE, who will kick off the presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I get to kick us off, but first want to start by saying this work was a collaboration also with Cassandra Merritt at UC Davis and send a thank you to Maureen Carew, Pamela Birdman, and Andrea Venezia for their continued support of this work. All right, so we're going to go ahead and advance the slide. Can we advance the slide? Great, thank you. So I just want to end by saying this work is grounded in a larger conceptual framing aimed at understanding key determinants of educational success, which includes strengthening students' aspirations and beliefs that they can do college, and access to the necessary information, preparation, and resilience that are necessary to navigate college successfully. So in particular, we aim to understand the structural barriers of these inputs and how policies and programs can strengthen opportunity structures in the pipeline to college, which remain which today remain unequal by race and socioeconomic status. All right, so today we're going to talk about, yes, so thank you for Sherry for advancing. We're going to go ahead to the next slide. Today we're going to talk about high school math courses. And so first, just advanced math course taking has been associated with post-secondary outcomes, including college entry, types of college entry, whether it's 2-year, 4-year, and selectivity of college, college completion, and even wages. Most of that work has been associational, given the multitude of factors that lead to why students take those math courses in the first place. But a more recent study from LARI, the Los Angeles Education Research Institute, tried to get at more causal estimates at, and does show that 12th grade course taking has a positive impact on many of those outcomes mentioned, in particular college eligibility, enrollment, and persistence. We also know that there are persistent disparities that exist in academic preparation by student and by school characteristics, and that course selection, in quotes, is a key factor of not just student choice, but school decisions. And so much of our work is aimed at understanding how barriers in the choices, in the structures that limit or constrain the choices that students have in deciding what types of courses to take. So the first report that I will talk about is a landscape on math course taking in California more generally, and then Sherry will follow up on these additional reports on and partnerships that we looked at more closely. So overall, I want to first say we leverage a great partnership, and I should have mentioned at the beginning a huge thanks to Jonathan Eisler at CD and the whole team at CD who make the
McCall, I'm going to step in. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties.
The 12th grade math course taking.
McCall, sorry.
Yes.
I think we're having some technical difficulties on your end. There's a lot of freezing. So I'm wondering if you can keep presenting with video off. Let's try that.
Sorry about that, and apologies for what I may have looked like frozen. In any event, I will continue and then turn it over to Sherry on a couple slides. Thank you, Heather. So in particular, we're looking at the 12th grade math coursing enrollment just pre-pandemic in 2018-19. We note first the circle on the left that 25% of seniors are not enrolled in any math. And looking at the right, we see that of those enrolled, of all students, we see that 50% of California seniors are enrolled in advanced math courses, and about a third are enrolled in Algebra 2 courses or lower. Just a quick note on the figure to the right, and all of these are available on the report, that the courses don't all add up to 75% because some students, in fact, take more than one math course. And importantly, when you check out the report, you'll also wonder about those 25% not enrolled in math. Perhaps they topped out. We do not find that. We find that those who are not enrolled in 12th grade are largely taking lower level math courses in the 11th grade. All right, we also in the report look at a variety of characteristics and by course types. Here we focus on students' math course taking by race, ethnicity, socioeconomic disadvantage status, and English learners. There's a lot on this graph, and again, I encourage you to look at the report. We can first focus on the red bars on the left, which show no math course taking, and here we see relatively similar rates, save for Asian students who have significantly higher rates of math participation as seniors. Focusing on the right side, we note that bigger differences in advanced math course taking, in particular calculus and AB stats by race ethnicity. In the report, we also break down 12th grade math course taking by the 11th grade Smarter Balance assessment levels and look at those as well as the 11th grade math courses that I mentioned. Great, thank you. So this work is partly, as we look at math course taking pathways, we note that high school math course taking is largely oriented around a path to calculus and has been, because calculus had been perceived as a strong foundation for higher education. But there's inconclusive evidence about this pathway, in particular, even when it starts, which is whether algebra should exist in 8th grade. And in fact, we note that a third of students on accelerated math pathways in particular repeat math courses. And so in fact, we're actually trying to understand whether a wide variety of math pathways are needed for diverse fields of study, right? And so how can we expand the math pathway so it's less of a ladder to calculus and more of a diverse set of options for students who have varying interests and goals professionally. All right, so in doing so, in expanding high school math course taking opportunities, how can we better align high school courses with the preparation needed for college more generally, and in particular, whether calculus or other math courses might be better suited for students entering diverse fields, some outside of STEM, and whether statistics or data science or computer science may be better suited for students in different fields. And so how do we more generally develop quantitative literacy and reasoning for all students, regardless of the pathway that they choose to enter? So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague to talk about the current policy context to diversify high school math course taking and what it looks like in practice.
Thanks, McCall, and good afternoon. I'm excited to get to talk to you about the efforts across the state to diversify math pathways. And if I can advance my own slides, that'll be, no. Okay. So there are several policy mechanisms from both higher education and K-12 systems that are supporting the expansion and diversification of high school math. In 2016, Governor Jerry Brown called for the diversification of math courses by allocating $3 million to create the California Math Readiness Challenge Initiative. And this CMRCI was a competitive grant to establish partnerships between K-12 and higher education, or CSUs in particular, to develop and implement alternative college level math courses. And more recently, the CSU system proposed an additional year of high school math, bringing the total to 4 years of high school math to its admissions eligibility criteria. And while this was not ultimately adopted, the proposal itself served to accelerate the discussion about availability and accessibility of high school math courses broadly, and the efforts to diversify advanced math course taking. And then also diversification of math courses is reflected in the proposed mathematics framework that the State Board of Education is expected to adopt this year. In practice, there are numerous efforts across the state to diversify math. Our research focuses on these 6 efforts in particular, the ones you see here on the screen. These 6 efforts are partnerships between, again, K-12 educators and higher education to develop and implement math courses that serve as an alternative to advanced math, primarily in the 12th grade, but not exclusively in the 12th grade. 5 of these 6 partnerships that you see listed on the screen were funded by that CMRCI grant. And they were collectively involved in a community of practice that was funded by the College Futures Foundation, where the partnerships, the course developers would work together to understand challenges to implementation and really the promise of these courses. And as researchers, we were invited to work with these 6 partnerships to help them understand the reach and the impact of these courses. And in fact, we worked with them for nearly 3 years, starting in March 2020, right before the pandemic. Maybe even the day before the shutdown. And we've been working with them doing really deep qualitative work with the developers, course developers, and the teachers teaching the courses, as well as detailed quantitative work to understand the reach of these courses and their impact. Each of these partnerships developed and implemented different courses, but the courses were similar in their approach, their pedagogy, and we collectively call these courses the AIM courses, Advanced Innovative Math Courses. So you'll see that acronym through the rest of this presentation. In 2018-19, which is the most recent year of data we examined, because it was the year that was unaffected by the pandemic, the most recent year. And in that year, 2018-19, these partnerships collectively served about 2% of the seniors in the state of California. Which is a pretty small footprint when you think about the footprint statewide. But importantly, if you look at the districts and schools that were implementing these courses, these courses were serving somewhere between 12 and 20% of the high school seniors in those schools. Enrollment in these AIM courses is representative of the cohorts in the schools. So in this graph, you'll see 2 bars for each one of the AIM courses. The top bar represents the racial ethnic composition of the students enrolled in this math course. And the second bar, the lower bar for each partnership, represents the racial ethnic composition for the cohort of 12th graders in the schools that are implementing these math courses. And what you can see here is that enrollment in the math courses is quite representative of the cohort at large. What's not depicted here, but also follows similar trends, is the representation of students by socioeconomically disadvantaged status and by English learner status. All 6 of these partnerships embody the key tenets of effective intersegmental partnership that we see in the literature. In particular, they are true collaborations between higher ed and K-12 systems. And they benefited from the infusion of state resources through the CMRCI grants, but also through philanthropic resources. They have a shared purpose that targets college-bound students who may not be interested or ready for calculus or the calculus pathway, but with the goal of improving quantitative reasoning and student confidence in math. This shared purpose is grounded in a commitment to equity and to seeing improved and more equitable outcomes for students. The partnerships work together to build community amongst the developers and the teachers implementing the course, and then really to develop the capacity of teachers through extensive and ongoing professional development and professional learning communities. Now, it wasn't a one-off type of professional development. And together they all had a goal for improved student outcomes. The pedagogy, like I mentioned, all the courses had a very different curriculum or different content, but very similar approach to instructional activities. And these included very student-centered pedagogy focused on problem solving, project-based learning activities, where students were involved in collaboration and cooperative learning, and really encouraged independent thinking. Oops. Oh, getting to the punchline. The partnerships really, our research revealed that they really were able to develop the capacity of teachers, math teachers, and teachers shared, they reported their increased confidence. They shared that they learned tools and strategies that allowed them to grow in their own professional goals as a math instructor. And in fact, some of them reported using the strategies that they learned for teaching these particular courses in other math courses that they were teaching. Teachers also reported increased confidence of students, saying that they often heard students talk about how they felt successful in math for the very first time, and they really believed that they had mathematical abilities. Going backwards. And AIM courses do, in fact, have a positive impact on student outcomes. So we use some advanced quantitative methods and leverage the student level, course level data that we obtained from the California Department of Education. We were able to compare similar students and control for a host of observable characteristics like prior math course taking and prior academic achievement. And through this, we observe a causal impact of these AIM courses on students' likelihood of completing the A to G requirements, or the requirements to be eligible for UC and CSU, by 3 to 10 percentage points, depending on which course we're looking at. We also see that AIM courses improve students' high school GPA in the area of math. And for some courses and some partnerships, we see increase in the likelihood of post-secondary enrollment. So we see these as promising early results about the impact of AIM courses in particular, and about the ability for diverse advanced math courses to have a positive impact on student outcomes. We feel like that continuing to expand these courses and continue to diversify will take continued investment from the state and education segments, and will take collaborative work and cooperative work to align high school math courses and college admissions expectations. It will require additional teacher training, maybe even at the pre-service level, and the involvement of school counselors as they advise students on what courses to take. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Osvaldo Soto, who's the director of the Discrete Math Project Collaborative, and he's going to share with us what it looks like to have one of these classes in development and implementation.
Thank you so much, Sherry, and thank you everybody who decided to put together this great webinar. I am Osvaldo Soto. Friends call me Ovi, so you can call me Ovi. And I direct the Discrete Math Project Collaborative. I want to separate a little bit the curriculum, which we call Discrete Math Pre-Collegiate, from Discrete Math Project Collaborative, which is the project in general. So this came about back in 2016 through the California Mathematics Readiness Challenge Initiative, along with the other AIM courses that Sherry and McCall were describing previously. I want to start with a big thank you to my university-based colleagues, my co-PIs, Bill Zahner and Randy Phillip, and of course the department chair at San Diego State at the time, Mike O'Sullivan. Of course, we've got teachers, people in community colleges, lots of people on our leadership team, and I think that speaks to the collaborative and partnership nature of this work. Lots of great and wonderful funders who believed that the work could be good. And then, of course, a special shout out to the folks at the California Ed Lab and Ed Insights at Sac State and UC Davis for the research and the effort that they've put in, along with Pam and other colleagues like Maureen Carew at College Future Foundation. If I left anybody off, thank you to all involved. So let's move on. Thank you. So like I said, back in 2016, we began this work, and we together with, I want to tell a little bit of the story of how it came to be. Colleagues from San Diego State met with colleagues from Sweetwater Union High School District, the largest secondary grade 7 through 12 grade district in the state. And we asked what the needs were, quickly identifying discrete math. And I understand a lot of people in the crowd may not know what is discrete math. This is a 10-minute talk, so I won't get into that. So let's black box it for now. And we redesigned some curriculum around discrete math. And specifically, we like to say that our project is more of a professional development project, or as much at least, than a curriculum project. We found that discrete math offers lots of accessibility, relevance, and can be very fun. So we thought this could be helpful to draw some students towards STEM. Since we started, we trained more than 60 teachers. We're looking at close to 7,000 students who've taken the course. And then we are innovating moving forward to incorporate some CS and specifically Python coding projects, since it's a workforce language. Let's move forward, Sherry. So after, as Sherry said, after this data had been collected and analyzed, one of the big eye-popping things for me as a director was this piece where it was noted that 3 to 10 percentage point increase of likelihood of completing A through G courses had been seen in the data. And I immediately asked, well, for which students? So as you saw in the graphic, it's definitely the case that in our largest districts, we see a large percentage of Latinx students taking the course. We see that each year around 1,000 of them are in the course, and that seems to be continuing and holding steady. And so, we're pretty happy to see those kinds of tentative results, but it begs the question, how did this happen? Can we say a little bit more qualitatively about how this partnership looks and came to be? So let's move forward. So if we look at what the students study in the course and what our goals are, I want to just kind of point out that our main goals were to help students find something to love in math, and we felt like discrete math has a lot to love. And we really, I think I could speak with and for all my other AIM project director colleagues in saying that the standards for mathematical practice are what we're trying to advance for all students, so they can really see the heart of mathematics and what we're actually trying to teach them. So we decided to take an introductory, and I emphasize the word introductory, piece swing at game theory, graph theory, and cryptography, which we knew would be new to students and teachers, creating what my nice and wonderful colleague Beto Vasquez at UCSD calls a probability of teacher training. They have the opportunity to learn new content along with their students. The last 3 sections, sequences and series, iteration, recursion, and combinatorics, are a little more standard topics, but we took a different approach to them. So let's move forward. So rather than tell this story on my own, I thought I would remind us all of why we're here on this webinar, right? And that's to help students. So let's hear from Grace and Hannah, 2 students who took the course.
I'm Hannah.
I'm Grace. Sorry.
I'm a senior, living life. I do
do sports outside of school.
Okay, which sports?
I do cheer and track.
Cheer and track, okay. And how about you, Grace?
I'm also a senior, and I do wrestling and aerial and contortion. I will say math has always been my worst subject, but I think it's improved with this class.
I would be the first in my family to go to college. The highest level of education would be high school for my parents. Yeah.
Okay.
My parents didn't do college when they were younger, but they just recently are into it.
Great. So before we move forward, I just wanted to emphasize a couple of things about these two students I was lucky enough to interview. One, their stories resonate in the sense that many of the students in our courses are they'll be first generation in college. Two, it's interesting, they come from such a diverse background where one student had taken pre-calculus in this case of this pair, and another had taken calculus AB, and yet they claimed not to have had good experiences in mathematics, even though they persevered to a level that most people would really find acceptable. So at the end, they felt the course did something for them that other mathematics courses hadn't done. And I found that really interesting, and it resonated throughout the interviews that we did, that students accessing new mathematical content along with their teachers led to a situation in which they could connect a little more closely to mathematics. So let's go forward, actually. And there we go. And so now, again, keeping to the theme of the how of this project, I want to give you just a little taste of what it looks like when teachers and university mathematicians even work together to look at some of the content. What does that sound and look like?
You were not able to control the one.
Oh, but you have to know the strategy. Okay, but if you know the strategy and you go second,
As long as
you just have to hope the first one didn't take one.
no, he took one.
They don't know. They don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It could be like this, and it could be like this,
Yeah.
and then as long as
Can you guys play that game all the way out?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and pause that. Sherry, thank you. So again, it sounds like that. It sounds like argumentation is happening, like explanation is happening, and like the actual settings of proof and proving are in place. When we look at things like the standards for mathematical practice, critiquing the reasoning of others, right, and really advancing argumentation, we find that that's a little bit of the how of how that came to be, I suspect. So let's go forward and let's go back to student.
You were not able to.
There you go. Perfect. So a colleague of mine did a dissertation using students in two of these AIM courses, and one of them was ours, luckily. So Jaden, a Black senior in our course, said, because other years I've just been, okay, I got the answer. I want to put it on the projector and be like, this is my work. So I think in this quote, a little hard to decipher at first, the student is saying, in this case, this is my work. I want to show it to people. I did it like this. Is there anybody else that relates to me? I genuinely get happy. I mean, this is exactly what we were after. I have an urge to push myself and to show it to other people, whereas I didn't like math before. This is what the course sounds like from the side of students. We're very happy to see this as part of Dr. Heinzman's dissertation. Go ahead and move forward. So, I want to just kind of end on a summary statement out of the case study that Sherry and Kathy and Cassandra and McCall put together. And thank you again for putting it together and doing all this work. Overall, our early evidence of the DMP and similar courses is clearly promising, right? And at the end, they go on to say it offers students alternatives to traditional calculus pathways and increases four-year college eligibility. We're very, very happy to see that there is some preliminary evidence showing that that is indeed the case, and it resonates with my experience of the students and the teachers. So thank you so much. I'll hand it back to you all. I think Heather.
That's right. Thank you so much. So if all of the panelists could come back on with video, we'll open it up to a discussion. So for folks that are attending the webinar, you can put questions into the Q&A, I believe also into the chat. And send along your questions, wonderings, can be really specific things about the research or broader things. So I think one of the things that I'll get started with, and I'd love for each of the panelists to answer this question, is about getting started. Whenever we have webinars or do research on partnership work, we often see something in its maturity. And a lot of times people don't necessarily know what are the first steps to take in order to get a big partnership like this off the ground. So Osvaldo, maybe we could start with you, although I don't see you on video. There we go. Just to provide your perspective as someone who did the work, and then we can turn to McCall and Sherry to add insights looking across different partnerships.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. I think getting started, it's helpful to have these conduits to K-12. I think from the university side of things, it's often the case that faculty members may or may not have had experience in K-12. Some faculty, for example, may not have been educated in the United States, quite a few actually. And having a person with K-12 background and experience as a person to link to is essential. Having good connections within district offices is essential, and determining, the needs of the district from a listening stance, I think on the university, on the IHL side of things is extremely helpful. Once you do that, then the two teams getting together and finding the local context a little more closely can be very, very helpful. And then finally, trying to find the sweet spot of rigor is probably one of the hardest points, I think, where from within a content side at a university level versus within a school district level, we need to find what's appropriate, an appropriate area of study at the right level for these students at this particular time. That's crucial to the work, I think.
You want me to answer the same question? So I think from our qualitative work, what was really clear to me, which I think is true across different kinds of intersegmental partnerships with different topics, is that these partnerships were very crystal clear in identifying the problem they were trying to solve, which was offering advanced math opportunities for students who might not be taking calculus or the calculus pathway. And so it was very crystal clear, and they came together, both higher ed faculty who wanted to solve that problem and K-12 with that shared purpose in mind. And then started to have the conversation of like, so now what do we do to solve this problem? So I think that's the starting place, is what's your purpose and what problem are you trying to solve?
Thank you both. McCall, I'm going to turn it over to you because we have a question in the chat box from Sarah Zimmerman. Can you say more about the 3 to 10 percentage point increase of completing A through G? Is that in comparison to students that try traditional math pathways? Also, how are districts deciding if they're offering an alternative third-year math or a fourth-year math? Can it be either or?
Okay.
Sure, thanks. Can you hear me okay? And see me okay? Okay, have somebody give me a signal if I freeze weirdly. All right, so yeah, I'll answer the first part, and actually all the fellow panelists can answer the second part too. But first is just that think of this as like a kind of average effect that compares students who have this similar likelihood based on a variety of observable characteristics, as Sherry mentioned, that go into the kind of computation of a similar types of students, some who take these math courses, and then in combination with all other options. And so it's kind of a weighted average on to think of as comparison to all other options, right? And I would encourage you to keep looking back. PACE, we're going to continue to do work on these math courses and other math courses for additional comparisons. But in general, you can think of that 3 to 10 as a kind of weighted average of all those other options of taking the course versus not taking the course. In terms of the other questions on deciding, and I'd like Ovi and Sherry and others to answer this, Again, it's important to note, and in that first report that I presented, you can see the full set of courses. So these AIM courses are still a relatively small footprint of the overall math course taking that California students take, but in the districts that are offering them, they're actually a larger footprint. And so many students are actually still taking statistics as other options, either instead of calculus or on that same calculus route. And I'd love for Ovi to add to this. And so the options as students take and the sequence of these courses are decisions also that districts make, both what to offer and when they should be taken. And that seems to differ some across districts.
Yeah, thanks, McCall. I think that's a good point to say we're not speaking for all districts, and different districts choose differently. Go back to National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, NCTM's Catalyzing Change recommendations. And one of the recommendations in that book was that we start branching pathways just a little earlier. So for example, offering students options, say after 2.5 years of common prep is a little bit, it's been on the table. And so depending on the school district, to answer the person's question, some school districts, I know like San Diego Unified is working hard to identify alternative third-year options as well. And so, you know, there's a lot of factors in place. It's a super hard question to answer because it has to do with other factors like dual enrollment is another issue. Can a student get credit at both the intersegmental partners, the K-12 and the community college, and it be transferable to deal with things like AB 1705? It's super, super complicated. And I would imagine this is going to vary greatly throughout the state and at particular districts, how they choose to deal with these things.
I'd just like to add, thank you, Obi. I think it is very context and local context specific, but I just wanted to add, because I don't think we really mentioned this in it, but of the 6 partnerships that we worked with, primarily targeted 12th grade students, but intro to data science, in fact, actually enrolls students in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And 5 of the 6 courses have Algebra 2 as a prerequisite in order to get into or to enroll in these AIM courses, but intro to data science does not have that same prerequisite. So again, I guess just like more evidence that that it's very local context specific and what problem you're trying to solve in terms of whether you're offering it as an alternative to what. But we were really focused on the 12th grade math course taking in our work.
Heather, can I add one last piece? And that is the computer science connection, I think is somewhat key in some of these courses. So intro to data science courses typically help students learn to code in RStudio, for example. And in discrete, we've been kind of moving toward Python training a bit. A student who wants to take stats, for example, might be thinking about studying in the humanities. Depending, this notion of branching pathways has to do with students deciding maybe a little bit, getting a little bit more agency in choosing what mathematics they want for the career they choose to pursue. So that's where it's a little bit of a wild, wild west right now.
Speaking of computer science, I just put a brief in the chat box that we had written by Paul Bruno, Miriam Safar-Perez, and Colleen Lewis on STEM and how to approach the expansion, or computer science and how to expand computer science here in California for anyone that's interested in learning more about that. So as we talk about, all 3 of you have talked about how it's very context specific and conditions really vary across the state. Goals vary across the state. What are some of the barriers that you've encountered in your work, or that others might be likely to encounter, so that folks can have a good idea of what the road looks like in getting these set up?
I'm happy to get us started and then have others add. So, I mean, I think the first one is, this piece that I tried to explain in the early, which is just how students think of these as choices and whether schools have a bigger responsibility and a bigger role to play in fostering kind of expected enrollment in 12th grade, especially given the both first associational, but increasingly more causal evidence on taking math in the senior year. And so there are, by diversifying the options of math, by ensuring that it's part of the master schedule. I know we don't have math teachers growing on trees, so, but ensuring the opportunity that it is expected to take math, and that taking math does not necessarily mean that there's an expected. There are options. There are options of courses, I think, is the biggest thing. So one, we have to have students believe that it's possible, make the course available, and believe that they have some agency in deciding what kind of math course looks like. And I know those are all tricky things to do, but that is sort of the direction I think that we need to head in.
Guess I can speak to one more, like kind of an adaptive barrier, and then maybe Obi can talk about the technical pieces of implementation. But I think one that we have to grapple with is the perception of calculus that's kind of pervasive across educators, parents, students, and that it's not the only pathway to higher education. And I think, you know, we can say it, but we have to really do the hard work of providing the evidence and the education to our school staff and to parents and students alike, that there are really viable alternatives to the calculus pathway, and that these courses or others like them are part of that opportunity set or option set.
Yeah. So wow, all of these questions are not softballs, Heather. This one in particular, the challenges are numerous. First of all, I think from the standpoint of a director, I'll say that teacher training is one of the big challenges. You know, for a teacher to take on teaching data science when they never had training in data science or discrete math, or to re-envision what it means to teach integrated math 1, 2, and 3 through the lens of the standards for mathematical practice. These are the challenges that my co-directors in other projects have been, not co-directors, but directors, colleagues have been facing as well. And I really give them a lot of props for taking on those challenges. I know that CSUs is, you know, one of the largest teacher training entities in the state, if not the largest outright, feels a lot of responsibility for this and really wants to help teachers and students have access to really high quality instructors who are ready. On the same note, you still have things like training people on the computer science side if you're running with RStudio, or if you're trying to teach with Python, et cetera, et cetera. So you're really talking about training over and over again, including the curriculum and what's the sequencing? How do students think about this? What are their challenges? The people don't know these things. A lot of research needs to be done on the side of just knowing student thinking and student epistemology. And then finally, if I go over to the institutional side of things, you mentioned, Sherry, and I think rightfully so, that calculus has been seen as the rigorous choice. And you know, and mathematics in general has been painted with the brush of gatekeeper at the university level. And we need to kind of rethink a bit. If students don't want to be in STEM, for example, what is an appropriate kind of mathematical training for them? These are big societal questions right now. How much quantitative reasoning does a citizen in our country need to validly interrogate text in the New York Times, for example? These are all big, big questions that can be perceived from multiple angles simultaneously. And the courses are trying to do that. And I say kudos to that.
Thank you so much for that. So I think that's a good transition into what will be the final question for everybody. And then we'll let folks get on to their next meetings. Just thinking aspirationally for a minute, we've talked about getting these projects started. We've talked about the barriers. For each of the three of you, what's your hope for what these types of partnerships can do or how they can expand? What do you want to see happen in the years ahead? Big question, but we'll end it aspirationally. Sherry, why don't we start with you, and then McCall.
Obi was going to start. I mean, it's wow. Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, I think my hope is that these partnerships, the 6 that we studied, serve as models of what could be, right? So, I mean, I think that probably each one of these partnerships sees themselves expanding to a broader reach within schools and districts in their geographic area. But I think that that's probably not enough. that there's that they could serve as models, because I think there's room for additional courses, different variety of courses, and there's definitely room to reach more students with, you know, the fact that we have 25% of our seniors not taking math. So I guess it's my hope that these serve as models, that like it can be done, and in fact it can be done with having a, you know, and it has a positive impact on students. So.
All right, I'll go next since I want Ovi to have the last word. And so I guess I would just to build on Sherry's comments, I would say, I think these not only serve as important models for what could be done to diversify, but also as collaborations between higher ed and K-12, as Sherry mentioned in her talk. And so much of what we know about this kind of lack of a kind of understanding between the segments and the sort of preparation for college. And I think these courses can also serve as a really important bridge. And we see more of that. We saw it years ago with expository reading and writing. And I think these present yet another opportunity for that kind of bridge for students to really feel successful. I mean, since we're talking aspirationally, I would say I also feel like it's important, I think in the videos and in the kind of work that Ovi and all the partnerships are doing, is also the spillover. The fact that these teachers are having training in these courses also means that I think the instruction that goes into other, you know, quote unquote, traditional, whatever we want to think of that matters too. And so I think the opportunity for diversifying the courses also means opportunity for diversifying professional development and how we teach and think about math. But then I just have to end on the point that those disparities must be disrupted, right? So it's not just that we see these, it's that we see really important inequities in the pipeline, and in particular in math. And that's why, you know, they do get the sort of bad name of a gatekeeper. And so I just think it's really important that we continue to probe particularly the equity questions with respect to the math pathways.
Wow, I don't know, McCall. I think you really nailed it. Some of the things I had on my list, right? That spillover effect, that all students get a really good mathematical experience, is one of my aspirations, and I'm sure the aspirations of all the courses, that we end up with a very informed citizenry of people who can reason critically and mathematically and use mathematics to interrogate arguments closely. And then like you said, McCall, as well, that we disrupt some patterns of racial inequities within mathematical achievement. I think a lot of students the analogy given to me is a lot of students are like, you know, a fish being asked to climb a tree when they're assessed. Like, you're just being assessed in the wrong way, but yet you have a lot of brilliance to offer. And sometimes the ways that we've taught mathematics traditionally doesn't allow that to come out. We don't get to see the brilliant reasoning of the students, which is the core of mathematics. And ultimately, as a good colleague of mine used to say, students end up hating the wrong thing. At least hate the right thing. Would be his thing. Hopefully come to love it, because there's lots to love. But, you know, we're not trying to make the world into mathematicians. It would be a very annoying place to live. But we certainly want students to come to love something in mathematics. That would be my aspiration for sure.
Love that. Thank you all so much for your perspectives today, for sharing your research and your work with our audience. And thank you to all of the folks who joined us today on their lunch hour to learn about and dig deep into math partnerships. I hope that everybody has a good rest of their day. Thank you again.